Revived Thoughts is a production of Revive Studios.
This is Troy and Joel, and you're listening to Revive Thoughts.
Troy, I am excited for another Joel and Troy chat about historical figure in church history. That's the subtitle of this episode here. Saint Valentine. You know, a lot of people are familiar with Saint Nick. You know, and that honestly was probably one of our most popular and one of the largest amount of the episodes that gave us the most amount of feedback was that Saint Nick episode where you just kind of ran me through Saint Nick and how we got, you know, to Christmas and how that became all combined into Christmas. I would reckon there's probably a significantly less proportioned amount of the public that knows that Valentine's Day is named after a Saint Valentine. You know, that historical figure is probably lesser known. I might be wrong, but I don't.
I think even though it's in the name, Saint Valentine's Day, like how much of us know about who Saint Valentine is or was, and like what his story is.
And I'll be the first to tell you, I know absolutely nothing. I mean, I am aware that it is named after a Saint Valentine who was a real person and historical figure. But beyond that, I'm excited to hear what you are bringing to the table with the information of who he was and how it morphed into Valentine's Day. And also, you know, I'm just assuming that, like, it seems like all holidays are named after historical figures. I'm looking forward to our Saint 4th of July episode coming up here in the summer. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it's St. Valentine's Day and Christmas are the only ones that have like that kind of historical significance. Like St. Patrick's Day, there's nobody really associated with him. Oh wait, just kidding, St. Patrick. Oh, okay, anyway.
Also a real person, eh?
Yeah, also a real person. You can go check out his episode on martyrs and missionaries. Elise already covered the work that he did in Ireland, so we don't really get to touch him. But before we get into St. Valentine's Day, we also need to say thank you to some people who have been supporting us on Patreon. We thank you for giving us some love, like one does on Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. And so we're going to give you guys some love back by giving you a shout out to some of our new supporters. Joel, can you tell us who some of those new supporters who've been keeping us going are?
Some great supporters recently. Helen, Dave, Brian, Corey, Mike, Todd, Gregory, just to name a few that have come in the past few months here. Really, it means so much to us that you are willing to chip in a little bit to help Revive Studios and help us produce content throughout the year. And if you want to contribute or you want to become a Patreon and support Revive Studios, follow the link in the description. We can get you hooked up with an ad-free feed. And if you send us your address, I can send you some thank you goodies, some stickers and bookmarks. Troy.
Yes.
Let's play what year did St. Valentine live? And again, okay. I know absolutely nothing. And our listeners might know more than I do about this, but I'm going to
how almost like braggadocious you are. Like, you wouldn't even believe how little I know about St. Valentine.
Don't
even challenge me. You think you don't know? I can't even spell his name.
I don't know how many, like, recent saints that events are named after. Like, it's an old thing, right? Like, I don't feel like the society, or I feel like it would have happened in the heyday of the Catholic Church where, you know, they're sainting people and holidays are being named after them. So I want to put it back, you know, kind of medieval or like maybe Renaissance. Let's put it in the 1600s. Did St. Valentine live somewhere in the 1600s?
Okay. You're pretty close. If you just are off by 1400 years, like, not too bad.
That's not close at all.
You were even further off than I thought you would have been.
Yeah.
So no, St. Valentine's Day, the original people, and so it's actually important to note that there is more than one person called Valentine who was martyred in like the same 50-year span from the year 250 to 300. And one of these guys was the one the Catholic Church was thinking of when they made him a saint and made a holiday after him. But we don't know which of them it was. We don't know if just the material, the resources, or whatever got lost over time. But when you say, hey, we're making a feast for St. Valentine the Martyr, and we go back through the martyr histories and we see, you know, there's at least two of them, we don't know which one they were talking about. And it's not like they clarified and said, we're referring to this one. It just says St. Valentine. So no one knows for certain which of the two Valentines that were killed was the right one.
So you're saying like 3rd century early
Yes.
church. This is that era. This
Yeah,
is like
and-
your Basil, right?
Yes. Yeah, this is exactly. Those would have been his contemporaries, kind of a little bit, I think, after Irenaeus or around that time, around Tertullian, like that little era
Yeah.
right there. We
And
haven't gotten to
apparently-
St. Augustine. We haven't gotten to Gregory of Nazianzus or any of those guys yet.
And apparently Valentine is just like that's a common name. It's like our John today. Like there was
Not quite
Well,
that
I mean,
common, maybe.
how many martyrs do we know that were both martyred that had the same names? I can't think of any.
Well, there's tons of Johns.
That's true, I guess.
Obviously, because we know from if you've ever been to our church history trivia night, that name
Yeah.
that John is an important question because of all the Johns that there are. But there's also, there was actually 3 Valentines murdered. So, martyred for the faith in this era. But we know one of them is probably not the right Valentine. It's just between the other 2. But yeah,
All right. So one of 2 Valentines.
I would say it's not the John of its era. That's too common a name. But it could be like the Nick. You know what I'm saying? Like Nick is
Sure.
a name. You know more than one Nick, but Nick's not like super common. So
Right.
Valentines are Nicks.
I dig it. Certainly not a common name now. Although I could see it making a comeback.
Yeah. That'd be kind of okay. Name your child Valentine. Let us know how it goes.
I mean, I'm not
even know.
I'm not gonna name my kid Valentine.
Go for it though. I feel like if anything, it almost sounds like it could be a girl's name now. But maybe that's because of Valerie, Val, and Val is the short Valentine. I don't know.
I dig it.
Boy, we really got to important places. We're sticking close to our script today, I can tell.
So what did St. Valentine do?
Wait, Joel.
Okay.
We can't just
I'm
jump
jumping
straight.
ahead.
Come on, man. You're 800 years early because before there was St. Valentine's Day, there was another holiday that is associated with this time. If you were to Google origins of Valentine's Day right now, you would see a bunch of websites telling you about this other holiday in Rome that happened between February 13th and February 15th. And audience, I'm telling you about this holiday partially because it's got some historical significance. We'll talk about it and just clarify the details of it. But partially because this holiday was super duper weird. And you need to hear about this because it's so strange. So it's called Lupercalia, and I apologize if I said that wrong. I'm not Roman from the 500s BC, so, I don't know how to say their names. But it honored the wolf that fed Romulus and Remus its milk. So, the Roman twins were left, off in Rome, and they were raised by a wolf, and this is an honorable ceremony to that wolf. The priests called themselves Luperces or something like that, and they would violently kill an animal, either a wolf or a goat, for fertility and virility, as one does during an old-fashioned pagan insane festival. They would then cut pieces of it off. They would cover one of the priests in blood, and then they would cover him in milk to wash off the blood. And sometimes they would wash the milk off, sometimes they wouldn't. And then this person would run either completely naked or nearly naked through the town, hitting people with the remains of this wolf, and the women would line up hoping to get hit with blood so that they would then be able to have children that year. And that's what you did in the middle of February in Italy. And that festival lasted legitimately almost 1,000 years in Rome, from the early 500s BC. Plutarch wrote about how popular it was, and the Pope and Catholic system was still trying to abolish it into the late 400s, into the 5th century, before it was really on its way out. So for 1,000 years, some of our ancestors, thought that was just a perfectly normal February 14th.
Can't say I've heard of that one. And you're saying this gets tied up with St. Valentine somehow?
So, because it's at the same time as St. Valentine's, people have wondered, and there's one more aspect of it. So the single men would apparently draw a name from a jar, and any single lady's name that was in that jar would have to go to them at this event, and it was kind of like a date. And because they're getting hit with the bloody whatever of a wolf or goat or whatever's going on, they're now very fertile, and that could lead to a night out, and these are not Christians. That's the thinking, right? However, there are some major problems with this. If you Google it, this is what like all the pop sites are going to tell you. Like I saw this on like 10 different websites saying this is definitely where Valentine's Day gets its origin, but it's actually probably not where Valentine's. So I'm kind of putting this crazy story out there to help you know what's not actually true about Valentine's Day, because here's the thing. That holiday was only celebrated in Rome, but when the Catholic Church put together Valentine's, the feast of Saint Valentine, it was sent out for the whole Catholic Church, not just Rome. So like, why would you work so hard to replace this holiday that's only in your town, not really affecting everyone else? Furthermore, this aspect where the single men take a single lady with them to this festival there's no record of it until the early 1700s, when a guy named Alan Butler was trying to discredit Valentine's Day by saying, oh, they just stole it from this Roman festival, and look, the single men would take the single ladies. And that's where the rumor comes from. There's no earlier source that ever mentions that. And when you take that kind of date aspect away from Valentine's Day, it's just a weird pagan festival. And St. Valentine had nothing to do with love at the time or anything either. It was just an honoring festival to him. And they had like 1,000 of those in the Roman calendar, so there was no reason to assume that this one was really any different. And so as interesting and weird as these things are, and people like to put them together because they think that they can like have a nice pagan love story origins or something, it really doesn't fit. It doesn't really look like this is true, that this is what Valentine's Day was sent to replace. It seems like it just was a coincidence that these two things happened.
Yeah, it sounds almost like it was like just like you're saying, like people in Rome that are over the millennia, indoctrinated with the Vatican and the Catholic Church. They're celebrating Saint Valentine at the same time that people are also talking. The ripples of this other tradition are still present, and so you kind of just by name associate one with the other happening at the same time.
And especially because like the Roman festival lasted even 100 years after the Christian Roman Empire outlawed any non-Christian festivals. This festival was still going on, but it was as this festival was dying, and one of the guys who was like against the festival, he didn't abolish it, he didn't actually have the power to, but he was pro getting rid of this holiday. He was also the guy who instituted Valentine's Day. So there's like, oh well, he's the guy who did it. Yeah, but like the festival was on its way out, and then he brought in Valentine's Day. But again, you got to remember, there are so many feast days to random martyrs and stuff. Like the Valentine's Day back then does not mean the same thing that it does today, which means we have to kind of go over and say like, well, what is Valentine's Day? Okay, so we have 3 different Valentines who it could be. Now, there's one we're pretty sure it wasn't him. Even the one mention he gets anywhere is this guy named Valentine and his companions die in Africa, period. That's literally all it is. So we know like nothing about his story. We're pretty sure it's not him that's getting the holiday. But there's these 2 other guys. One is famous. His story at least goes that the emperor at the time, I believe Emperor Claudius II, wanted soldiers to fight. He wasn't having enough soldiers in his army. He believed it was because too many soldiers were getting married, so they wouldn't go off to war any afterwards. So he banned marriage. But this, this preacher heroically went and kept marrying the soldiers quietly in the dark so that the Christians wouldn't live in sin. And he got put in jail and killed for it, because of what he was doing. And that's one Valentine that maybe it was that guy. Then there's another Valentine who was a bishop, and he was traveling through, and during the time that Christianity was illegal, he kept preaching the name of Christ, and he was taken into jail and killed. And that's pretty much all we know about their stories that comes from that era. Like, we wish we knew more, but those are really simple stories. These are just pretty short martyrdoms that happened. And again, the Catholic Church has never been super clear. Like, they didn't tell us which one they were talking about, and it's been 1,600 years. We can't ask them anymore.
I mean, imagine
so when they picked up St. Valentine.
I imagine like just some bishop in the Catholic Church that was like high up, or like some cardinal that like was friends with this Valentine and wanted to honor him somehow, and
well, not probably that, because like the St. Valentine's died in the 200s, like the 3rd century, but this holiday is instituted at the end of the 5th century, so 200 years has passed by. But again, they clearly must have had more information and more knowledge. I don't know if it's just oral history or something that was written down at their time that we don't have anymore, because they seem to think it was worth noting these guys' stories. but they don't tell us why that is worth noting. So, like, to a degree, St. Valentine's Day is a bit of a mystery because we don't know, okay, which of these Valentines and what made this one, like, because there were so many martyrs during that time. What made whoever of these two Valentines so specific that you wanted to elevate him higher than his peers? And we don't really know what it was.
Lost
exactly.
in history. That's interesting. Yeah,
it is.
Some document, burned in the fire of Alexandria or something like that. That like,
yeah.
I would be curious if there's like some record room in the depths of the Vatican that like has. Surely there's some type of document that goes back.
No, I mean, I even went to CatholicEncyclopedia.com and like you can go look it up too. Their information is so scant on like even they're just kind of like, here they are, here's all we know. You're like looking at 2 paragraphs. You're like, is that really all you have? Like, this is nothing. Like, you guys, you had this feast to this guy, and you yourselves have forgotten why you put it there. It seems very obvious.
I mean, that's interesting because to me that means that in the year 500, like, people celebrated Saint Valentine and were more like aware and like, Saint Valentine was a bigger thing to them in that day than it is to us now. Like, it's just been kind of forgotten and morphed into something else.
Well, so actually, I don't know that that's true. No, that's actually, we'll get to that a little bit later, but like, that's not quite true because they had so many feasts to different martyrs, and it was just a feasting day. Like, it was nothing super special about it in the sense of just like, this is the day we honor this one. But the Catholic Church had so many. And I also think it's part of the reason we lost that history is because it happened right at the turn of the 5th century. The Roman Empire is collapsing. All these things are happening around them. And then they institute this holiday, but like, writing and book writing, we almost completely lose like all of our history during this time, and it just barely gets preserved. There's so much loss. So like, there might have been real reasons, real documents, even real stories that explain Valentine's significance. But again, because it was coming out right as the Roman Empire is just collapsing out from under it, right before, all the different pagan tribes come and invade and take over these territories and things like that, during all these big wars with the Arians, and all this crazy stuff is going on with the church and all that just whatever, group of people maybe was in charge of preserving this legacy, just got lost to it. So now there is a little bit of embellishments that have happened over time. Like, if you look up St. Valentine's, you will find some other stories. These definitely come way later, but it's worth telling because maybe, who knows, it could be that some string of reality is attached to them. More than likely, though, it just helps you to know, like, here's how they've embellished a story over time. But the kind of official-ish version is that one of these Valentines, whichever one it was, and most people like to use the one who was marrying people because since we now see Valentine's Day as a holiday of love, right? You want that Valentine, the one who is, marrying people for love kind of a thing. Sweet. And he gets taken to jail himself. Some versions have him as like this heroic guy who's breaking people out of jail for a while. He's saving Christians. They really kind of beefed his story up. But then he gets taken to jail eventually and thrown kind of, he's thrown in the prison. Things didn't work out. And but he meets the jailer's daughter. One version is because saints always need to have like some miracle kind of attached to them. Right. He heals the jailer's daughter. Somehow maybe she was blind or something. But whatever it is, they fall in love. He writes a Valentine for her, like a final letter goodbye, and he signs it "Your Valentine," and then he dies. And like, there's certainly a made-up story. Certainly it did not. I don't normally say for certain, like, I don't believe it happened. But this one I'm pretty sure did not happen.
It sounds too perfect.
At least not in that way.
Yeah, too cute.
It's too cute, and it's too perfectly associated with what we consider Valentine's Day today.
Revisionist history for sure.
Yeah, because when they instituted Valentine's Day, they did not see it as like a love couple day. Like, they did not see it as like this romantic holiday. And so for them, it wouldn't make sense to do all that. Like, they were honoring a martyr, not this love day kind of thing.
As a parent, no 2 days are ever the same. At Care.com, you can find trusted and flexible sitters to help manage your family's ever-changing schedule. Care.com can even help you out with housekeepers, dog walkers, senior caregivers, and more, so you can find care for all you love. And 100% of caregivers who use Care.com have been background checked with CareCheck, a key first step in hiring confidently. To get the help you need to make it all work, sign up now and find a great sitter at Care.com.
This message is brought to you by Regeneron. If you have diabetes, listen closely because your ears could help your eyes. Excess sugar from diabetes could lead to eye damage and vision loss, even blindness, and you might not even notice it at first. So remember, now is the time to get your eyes checked. Eye care is especially important with diabetes. See a path forward with actions and potential treatment options that may help your eyes and protect against vision loss. Go see an eye care specialist and visit noweyesee.com to take charge of your eyesight. That is NOWEYESEE.com.
So then how did we get from where we are to this love holiday? Actually has to do with medieval era. So we don't really see Valentine's Day referenced again for another 1,000 years. I mean, other than just like it's a feast day people celebrate. But the first time we start to see it associated with love is in the 1300s. Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales, mentions it in his book, The Parliament of Fowls. And when I was talking to somebody else, I thought the Parliament of Fowls, and it's not that I thought this is how I want to believe it. So if you're a big literature nerd, don't correct me. In my mind, it's a parliament full of birds arguing about like feather taxes or something cool like that. And like, you know, the crows are one party and like the pigeons are another. And it's a wild, crazy congress of birds. And I don't want it to be anything else, to be honest. I want to keep that vision of it. So let me have that one. It sounds like a pretty cool story to me. I don't know about you.
Parliament of Fowls.
So So we'll leave it at that. If you've read Geoffrey Chaucer, because I was talking with somebody who had, and they were like, "That's definitely not what it is," and I was like, "Yeah, but it sounds cooler if it was." So, he in this book he mentions that like somebody was talking about love, and he's like, "Oh, love on the day of Valentine's, the day that the goddess of nature or whatever brings the birds together in love. That is the day they found each other," something like that. And so by the 1300s, we see that it's become associated with love because of birds. So you know how in America we have Groundhog Day, which is like this silly day where like a groundhog comes out, and if he sees a shadow or whatever, it's 6 more weeks of winter, and if he doesn't, he just kind of wanders around and spring is coming, right? And we all know it's not true, but it's just kind of fun. I think that's what happened here. Like in the medieval day, for whatever reason, they decided that the middle of February 14th, is when birds found their mate and like would go and, start building their nests, and their love mate, whoever they were going to be with together, they found them on the day February 14th. So it became like the Love Bird Day. And somehow between that and the fact that it's the same day as this guy's feast, Valentine's Day becomes associated with love. It's a day of finding someone you love. And so soon people start writing poetry to each other. They start making this their day to have someone they love because of its association with these birds falling in love. And it sounds weird, but I mean, you got to have a day, right? You got to have something that you're doing, something special, make it special. It's middle of winter. You're in Europe, especially England and France. They really like the idea of Valentine's Day being kind of like this special love day. In fact, like England and France added a legend to it that if you dream about somebody on Valentine's Day like that evening, it means that's who your soul is supposed to be with. And, very soon, again, we're finding poetry mentioning the importance of Valentine's Day. In the year 1400, King Charles of France put together a party. He called it the Charter of the Court of Love, and he would invite young men to perform songs, and young women would judge it, and it was a very cutesy, lovey-dovey kind of, romantic-y thing for the court, having a good time. But they did it, and they chose February 14th to do it on because to them that was a day of love. Now, I saw one source, Oxford, was like, he only did this to distract from a plague. I feel like that's a little cynical. Who knows? Maybe he did it to distract from a plague. Maybe I don't know how like having a love festival would completely distract from a plague, but
it certainly would help.
Maybe it was. I mean,
politicians have done stupider stuff to distract from plagues.
I mean, if my dad is dying of plague, I'm not going to be like, well, Dad died of plague, and somehow that's King Charles's fault. But the love festival
to get
is nice.
people's minds off of their depression and stuff like that. You can go to this
sure.
ball.
I'm a little less cynical. I like to think that King Charles genuinely wanted to have a fun love festival while he's in the middle of losing the 100 Years' War. And that was what he was doing. All right. But, who knows? But the oldest known Valentine came to us in the year 1415. So this is the first time somebody uses the phrase Valentine, I'm pretty sure. And he was the Charles, the Duke of Orleans. He had been taken to the Tower of London because he also was losing the 100 Years' War. And he wrote a romantic poem and had the letter delivered to his wife. And he was like, this is my Valentine to you because I can't be there for you. And so we see this now being associated very specifically specifically with Valentine's Day and getting cards or being called Valentines. So like that love aspect by the 1415 is like super, embedded into the conscience. King Henry V, when he was, leaving his wife, he actually hired a famous poet to help him write poetry for his Valentine's Day. Ophelia and Shakespeare, whom I have never read this version of Shakespeare. I read a lot of, you have to read Shakespeare in high school, but outside of Shakespeare in high school, I never really read anymore. But she talked about finding her love and, falling in love specifically on Valentine's Day. And so this just kind of gets embedded slowly into the culture that like Valentine's Day, day of love. Why? Because of the birds or something, right? But either way, it doesn't matter. As that birds aspect gets lost, it doesn't matter because the love aspect stays. And by the 1600s, everyone in Western Europe, especially England and France, chocolates, flowers, love notes, that's the day you confess your feelings. And I didn't think about this, but back in those days, like you couldn't, if you wanted to deliver a card to somebody, like you had to go give it to them because the post office didn't really work very well. And so like when you gave someone a card, like you were confessing those feelings quite directly.
So what, sorry, what year is this? What era are we in?
It was like the 1600s. We moved forward to 1600s.
Yeah, well, if you're rich, you have like a page that can run it, down the...
Maybe,
like
yeah,
a runner.
But it's a pretty direct thing. I guess I also thought like maybe you could sneak into their house and drop off the letter, but I'm just saying like
weird.
It's probably a pretty direct thing still.
Yeah, I like it.
Now,
you gotta knock on the door and give them the letter.
Now, if you're wondering, because you got to be at some point asking yourself this question, okay, if St. Nicholas, Santa is the guy for Christmas, how did a flying baby with a bow and arrow become the guy for Valentine's
Cupid,
Day, right? And this happens around this time too. Yeah, Cupid. So Cupid gets associated with this holiday because Cupid was originally in the Greek pantheon of gods, Eros, and Eros was like this mighty, muscular, invincible. He was in some ways like the most powerful god because he could control the desires of other people, and whatever he wanted, they would do for him. So he was like invincible. Nobody could beat him. He was super strong and muscular, and he had all these powers. And he was like the cheat code, right? Like if you're playing, a game with your daughter and she wants to be superheroes, she'll be like, "You can be ice powers, I'm fire power." But then like really quickly she'll be like, "I'm also ice powers, and I can fly, and I'm a cat creature." And you're like, "Wait a second, you've way overpowered your character." Well, that makes sense for a 6-year-old. Well, the Greek mythologists kind of did this with Eros too. They made him like way over the top, too powerful, and he's way too much. But there's a story, Eros and Psyche like fall in love or something, and that story would actually inspire Beating the Beast in the 1700s, kind of based off that. But anyway, so the Greek mythologist people were kind of like, okay, we made Eros too powerful for our stories, let's tone him down a bit. So in the 400s, they go, well, he's actually not like a super mighty god that does whatever he wants. He does whatever his mom tells him. Aphrodite's in charge. And so then they made him the son of Aphrodite. And then for whatever reason, like, well, if he's a son, he should be a kid. So then eventually he's like a kid. And then eventually he goes from like this mighty muscular man to just like toned down to like a baby. And they're like, it's a baby, that's good enough. And when the Romans took over Greece and they like basically stole all their gods and stuff, they were like, oh, we like this baby. Maybe they give him some wings. I don't know if he had the wings at that point. And eventually you have this flying baby that controls your love, not really your desires per se. I don't know where he gets the bow and arrow. That part just kind of gets added on later. And that's how, so when in the 1600s this love holiday shows up, there's kind of, people are interested in the Renaissance and Greek culture, and they just kind of slap this flying baby in there. And that's how, Eros, this once super powerful, way over the top Superman like hero, ended up becoming like a flying baby that's on Valentine's Day.
So was the baby associated? He was associated with love previous to that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So he's just another.
Yeah, he was. It was kind of like originally he controlled your will, and that turned into control your desire, and that kind of controlled into turning into your love. And like Cupid and Eros have a lot of stories written about them, and even like into the 200s AD, they're still making up new long stories about Cupid because like, of all the Greek gods, he's the one about love, so you can tell love stories with Cupid. So he has like long stories where he's like the hero and helping people and doing different things and all that kind of stuff because he's the love god, so you could tell your more romantic Greek stories using him and stuff like that. But again, it was just, and so as they were rediscovering those in the 1500s and 1600s, they were embedding that kind of into
They're just tacking on their
Valentine's
You got
tradition.
a love mascot, you got to tack that on the love holiday, put the love mascot on the love holiday.
So that's, and I mean, and yes, the day is named after Saint Valentine, but having this dying martyr prophet on your Valentine's Day card probably doesn't look as nice as having like a flying baby with a heart. So I guess that was the kind of thought there.
Yeah, Hallmark, they had that figured out.
So by the early 1700s, we know that America, like, not yet United States of America, but like colonial America is celebrating Valentine's Day. Mexico, Canada, the United Kingdom, France. This is pretty much a practice, right? Like, now, I'm not saying everyone is. I don't know if they're celebrating this kind of Valentine's Day in Rome. Probably not. They're probably sticking more to the original feast. And like, I can't tell you what they're doing in Turkey, right? Or like even in more Christian places like Poland. But for the most part, any place that's kind of on the west side, they're enjoying the love aspect of this holiday and giving each other cards. Now, something weird kind of happens in the 1800s. In the 1800s, at that time, the British postal system, whoever sent the card didn't have to pay for the card they sent. The other person receiving it did. So it was kind of rude to send cards unless it was something important, because you're making the person pay for it. And if it was like a long ways, or there was like a bunch of taxes and toll roads, like you could be making somebody pay like 10 cents to get a card from you. And that's like a lot. And if they don't pay for it, they don't get the card, and then it means nothing, right? So like there's a little bit of problems there. Well, in the 1800s, like the British people lobbied and were like, hey, we need one payment, one price. It needs to be really cheap, and we need to make it like the sender sends it. So they changed it all up, and they created the postal system that they not have today. I'm sure it's changed since then, but like the more modern style of the postal system. And they said that you can send one letter for 1 cent. And that's totally reasonable. And people were so excited. So much mail just like exploded because they could finally send letters to each other. And Valentine's Day took off because it's like one of the biggest letter card days. And so you could send Valentines to all your friends for like 10 cents and it would be no problem. Everyone was super excited. But then in Britain, I don't know if this happened in America to the same degree, but in Britain they started making what were called vinegar Valentines. These were like supposed to be lighthearted jokes, but they turned quite mean and nasty. And some of them were like just, hey, you're my friend, I'm making fun of you. Some of them were like, somebody sent you a Valentine and this is your response. I was like, no, I don't like you like that. Some of them were just, because you could send letters anonymously for the first time in history, people are just sending spam and hate and just ripping on each other, right? Like, because you can do that now, proving that humans always wanted to be mean to each other. The internet
people have always been awful.
This was just... Yeah, this was just as soon as we could be anonymous and mean to each other, we were. And I wrote down 2 of these just to give you a little bit of a flair. But if you want to look up the pictures, they're horrible. Like they're like cartoons of the people they're making fun of, but they give them like just horrible looking noses, giant heads, just really mean stuff. But one of them is, you fancy you display such grace, but how could you do that when you have such an ugly face?
Wow, that's pretty good.
And another one said, no, I'm like, I wish if we're going to live in an age where people making fun of each other, I do wish there was a little bit more of a poetic flair to it, you know?
Yeah, say what you will, but that's some talent that he's got there.
Tell me what you think of this one. Poor old croaker, stop your clack. You don't need to paint everything quite so black.
It's pretty good, too. It's pretty good. A little bit more dated,
it's not bad.
but...
I like it. Oh, you talking? Stop your clacking there, Joel. This isn't an out-of-phrase date at all.
Yeah, I love it. It's like a 300-year-old version of the internet. You could just
it really
comment
is.
section on YouTube.
That literally, when I was looking at that, I was like, I just feel like with the pictures too, I'm like, these literally are just like
they're just memes
from 200 years ago. They're just that completely, just with a little bit, again, a little more of a poetic flair to it. So if you are, if I don't know that we get much say in the world of the mean memes, because I don't have any world in that. But if you want to bring that back, bring back the poetic flair. Really start going for that. I think it just adds a little bit more to it. In America, we did something similarly bad with Valentine's Day cards. Our postal system was kind of getting set up at the same time too. And we like to draw comics on our Valentines, but those comics got very inappropriate and vulgar and obscene, so much so that there were many times when postal workers would refuse to deliver Valentine's Day comics and cards because they were so inappropriate. So, not always, not everything about this holiday associated with it has always been good. There have been some, apparently when we first got the ability to send people mail, we did some not so nice things with those things. Working on Valentine's Day was actually really awful too. It was like, if you hear about people who work for Amazon during Christmas, that's like what the postal workers were saying life was like for them. They were just carrying gigantic bags of Valentines running all over town all day for like the 2 weeks before and after Valentine's Day. So they did not like working that day very much, and getting vulgar and obscene cards they had to deliver in the middle of all of that was not something they enjoy. Soon the cards are being mass produced. This is around the era of the factories and industrial revolution, all that. So soon we're getting workers who are just, their only job is to make Valentine's Day cards for people to sell. One factory, according to Charles Dickens, had 3,000 women working in it, and he called it Cupid's Manufactory because so many girls were just sitting there all day making Valentine's Day cards for them to sell around that time. Another woman, Esther Holland, I think was how her name is pronounced, worked at her father's bookstore in America, and she saw all these Valentine's Day cards in Europe, thought it was pretty cool, but thought she could do a better job. So she started adding from her dad's like bookstore, office store, started adding little frills, started adding little, laces and little flowers and little things to make her cards look prettier, and started selling those cards. And those cards went through the roof, and she got the nickname the mother of the American Valentine, which is why today when you get a Valentine's Day card, unlike a birthday card or any other card, it'll have all this lace and bows and extra added stuff. Is because she started doing this at her dad's office store one time and made the Valentine's Day cards special in that way. She would make $100,000 a year just making, with her little factory, just making these extra special looking Valentine's Day cards.
Not too shabby.
Not too bad. By 1868, the British chocolate company Cadbury was then selling heart-shaped chocolates. And chocolates had always been associated, but really in the 1800s, it took off, which is good. People were starting to get more romantic. We're starting to marry more for love than just for business and stuff like that. But like they needed help because the early gifts they were giving each other were spoons and gloves. And so I think chocolate and flowers were kind of in the better direction than the old classic love spoon.
Are these good quality gloves? I'd pick a good hardy pair of gloves over some chocolates any day.
I know every man listening remembers when he was shopping for his wife's first spoon that he had to go to the store and go get. So I'm glad that, our ancestors, as they learned to love and date, they had to learn, the classics of gift shopping. In those early days, it was all about the spoon and the glove. And getting,
chocolate is certainly easier.
Nice, hearty. Yes, a little bit sweeter. And again, they were giving candy all along, but again, the heart-shaped chocolate, the giant bouquet of flowers, that stuff kind of took precedence over, the not-so-good gifts. So the reason I say all this, and may add some of these extra details too, is you may have heard Valentine's Day is a Hallmark holiday. People will sometimes cynically be like, oh, this isn't a real holiday. I show my love to my wife every other day of the year. It's a day for just the Hallmark company to make its money. Hallmark doesn't get involved with Valentine's Day until the year 1913 when they sell some Valentines, and they don't officially make a Valentine's Day like a part of their catalog until the year 1916. Which it makes sense. Of course, Hallmark, the biggest card company, in the world, would at some point get involved with, the second biggest card holiday in the world, which is Valentine's Day. So it wasn't surprising Hallmark got in, but people were giving love notes, love letters, making mass manufactured, love cards 100 years before Hallmark was even touching it. So it has a much longer history of love before that. And these days, in the year 2013, they think about 190 million Valentine's Day cards went around. Now, that number went down by the year 2021 just because we don't send as much cards. It probably went down to 145 million, but that's still a lot of Valentine's Day cards in circulation. Christmas is still the biggest card-giving day of the year, but Valentine's is definitely number 2. And if you include children's activities, so if you include the fact that the kids, when they go to school, they bring 20 Valentines and give it to everybody in class, and each kid's bring 20 Valentines, then actually that number goes up to 1 billion Valentine's Day cards because of all those teacher activities, bringing this home for mom and dad, all that stuff, and that number goes through the roof. And that one is actually bigger than Christmas when you include the children. In 2021, Americans spent about $21 billion celebrating Valentine's Day and its different things. It's actually one of the most popular holidays purely in terms of how many people acknowledge it or celebrate it, because there are people who don't celebrate Halloween who have no trouble acknowledging Valentine's Day. There are people who don't celebrate Christmas because they're celebrating a different holiday during that season. But when it comes to Valentine's, almost everybody acknowledges on some level Valentine's Day's existence, even if they're not married or they don't have a relationship. They still acknowledge that that is the day it's supposed to happen. And because it's such an easy holiday to do, it's actually wildly popular, not just in America, but around the world, because all you got to do is send your loved one a love note or something, or acknowledge, hey, happy Valentine's Day, I love you. And you've kind of in some ways celebrated it. So in some ways it makes it one of the easiest holidays to celebrate and one of the most popular. And people just like love. And so it makes it a pretty popular one for people, even if you're not. So somehow we went from St. Valentine, one of possibly 3 different men martyred in the early 200s, to a flying baby shooting arrows with a bunch of love notes and chocolates and stuff like that. But it's still pretty popular, still pretty big.
I wonder if, you talk about this Greek holiday that happened during this time of year, and also, the medieval people talking about these birds finding their lovebird during this era as well, and the king throwing this love banquet at this time. I wonder if there's just something associated with mid-February that, like, on a human level, like, are people more loving in the middle of February?
Maybe.
Due to, like, would this have happened regardless of, you know, circumstances and stuff like that? Maybe it has something to do with the seasons and the weather or something like that, where people maybe cooped up after some snows or something like that, a lot of snowfall. I'm not sure, but it seems like there's a lot of things that, you know, we're kind of just converging in love mid-February.
Although I appreciate the sentiment, I don't know that like any other part of the world besides like Western Europe and those places got into Valentine's Day, and I don't know that there's like an equivalent version of Love Day, say, you know, in Chinese history or in other cold places like that. So interesting. If there is, and it's in the same month, then I think you'd probably be correct. And I haven't done the research to be able to answer that. But if not, then it just seems to be like a fun holiday that sprouted out of this area. But yeah, it would be a good question. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that, but I don't know enough about the history. I didn't look into other similar style holidays to see if something like Valentine's Day existed of old from those kind of times. But either way, it's a fun holiday. It's nice. I'm not cynical. I like Valentine's Day. You know, me and the missus, we gave each other gifts. I'm a big fan. So I'm one of those people who thinks it's nice to have a day. Yes, you can celebrate your spouse every day, but you can also celebrate Jesus every day. But Christmas and Easter are nice to remember too. So I'm a fan of marking special occasions to make it special. I know other people do not feel that way, and that's okay. You know, Romans 14, one day is holy and another is not. That's all right. Just be convinced in your own mind. So y'all do how you want to do. And I mean, we certainly have drifted from the original St. Valentine quite a bit.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we set a record for, you know, this Revive Thoughts Church History / Sermon podcast episode involving the least amount of church history of any of our episodes so far to this point. Yeah, certainly more. We're just taking the history out of the church history, and you know, it's a fun episode. This obviously we enjoy our show being edifying, but every once in a while it's just fun to take a look back at history and see where things came from, see where things have gone, and I found it really interesting. I found it interesting how little we know about St. Valentine.
Yeah, me too. I was a little bit bummed when I went into this. I was hoping it would be like St. Nicholas, where it's like, this is super interesting history. We could all learn and grow. From St. Valentine, you don't really get that, and maybe that is the message. If we're gonna look for, you know, if we're looking for some gem in the rough here, it's that, you know what? Sometimes if you do not keep the focus on God, you eventually lose the meaning of what you're doing, even in the first place, and it drifts into something completely human-centered. Maybe that is our message here. We lost the focus of why we celebrated Valentine's Day, and we turned it into something just completely different. But again, I don't think that Valentine's Day is a bad day. I think love for your spouse is a laudable trait, and I think there's nothing wrong with having a day to commemorate how much you love your significant other. And if you're a single person, you know, it's a day to maybe confess some feelings or think about, you know, where you're heading in that direction. So
awesome. I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Revive Thoughts. If you want to join us on Patreon, again, follow the link in the description. We appreciate the donors that help out Revive Studios financially, and again, we can get you an ad-free feed. And if you don't follow us on social media, be sure to search for us. Facebook is probably where we have the most active community, so hop on there and just search for Revive Thoughts, and you can find us there.
Thank you for joining us for another Revived Conversation, kind of break from what we normally do, and we are looking forward to bringing some more sermons and some more history conversations to you next time. This is Troy and Joel, and you're listening to Revive Thoughts.
Careers at Mayo Clinic are life-changing for employees and for our patients. The Center for Digital Health creates digital products and seamless patient experiences through simplicity, innovation, and the human touch. We are currently hiring in critical areas on our team, including product development, experience design, data and analytics, portfolio management, and more. Join us in the Center for Digital Health. Become part of Mayo Clinic's mission. We inspire hope and create new ways of delivering trusted healthcare solutions for patients around the world. Visit jobs.mayoclinic.org/CDH-jobs to find out more.
Do you know how to report and detect a gas leak? Columbia Gas cares about your safety. So if you smell a sulfur-like rotten egg odor, please stop what you're doing, leave the area immediately, and call 911 and Columbia Gas. For more safety information, visit ColumbiaGasOhio.com/stay safe.